Yeah, I think it's at risk if people don't understand it. I think it's not only the independent board, it is the exquisite design of our park system.
Right.
And now I'm way beyond the playgrounds into the lakes and the river roads and all the gardens and the incredible staff that we have that are constantly working in the parks and taking care of them. People don't understand how many people it takes to take care of it. We have a very unique park board. We vote for them. I think sometimes people think they're voting for people who run playgrounds, you know, the people who are the coaches or something. No, we need visionary people who understand the business. And I'm not saying anything of it. I mean, that's part of it.
Yeah.
It's part of it.
Yeah.
But we've had visionary people along the way that have held on to this for us. I know when we first started working on this project, my husband and I, he used to say, explaining the parks to Minneapolitans is like trying to explain water to a fish. We have it, and we don't know anything better. People move here and they think that they just came to a beautiful place, and they don't understand how much maintenance it takes, how much, I mean, we pay more for our taxes, sure we do, but we get to live here in the middle of this giant park, in the middle of it, our homes, and we get to live here. People complain sometimes about events and too much people parking out in their neighborhoods. How lucky we are. We're the ones who live here. We should welcome everybody. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah.
So I think it would be a terrible thing if we lost our independent park board. I think we should be careful we should know who's running. We should talk to them about our feelings about what's important, and then we should vote for the best people.
And the airport was originally designed in this room. And you might wonder, why was the park board designing the airport? The answer goes back to Charles Loring, who was the visionary of the Minneapolis park system. He hired Cleveland, who did this drawing. And Loring saw to it that the park board would be the only legal entity in the city that had the power to purchase land outside the city. And so when the airport needed to be built in 1928, it was going to be the park board who purchased the land to do it. And if you look really closely, here's the compass showing which way north is. That's the Spirit of St. Louis. That's Charles Lindbergh's plane, which he had just flown over to Paris the year before, in 1927. And so just because that was such a thrilling, galvanizing event in American history, they decided to put Lindbergh's plane on the compass of where north is pointed.
He said to me, that house should be a National Historic Landmark. That's a much higher elevation. It's more like Fort Snelling is that. Of course, I talked about Mount Vernon, that is that, you know, and that would give it more protection and more funding. It could get much more funding. And so I kind of thought, wow, you know, so I started looking into that while other things were going on with the house here in Minneapolis. And we hadn't done much about that when the Mr. Wirth I knew died in 2009. When he died, in his will, people laugh about this, but it's true. He left me all the resources that we'd been working with. He left me the furniture we had collected for the house. And he left me a list of things he would like me to do. But it all ties into that. I mean, everything is associated with that. And in the list, one thing he wanted me to do was go to Washington, talk to the keeper of the National Register, and find out about this national landmark, which would help to protect the house even more. And so I took some pieces of resource material. One of them was the letter from Jacqueline Kennedy, because that ultimately Conrad's Wirth was the extension of his dad's work. So landmark has to do with the fact that Conrad Wirth grew up here, learned here, and carried on. And you can see the parallel in their work. There's even newspaper articles about Theodore advising Conrad in Washington. So I went there and I showed them a few things that I had, and I gave them copies of Conrad's book. Theodore wrote a book here in this house in his retirement about how the work here in the Minneapolis park system that he did, and then a letter when Theodore died from Frederick Law Olmsted Jr. to Conrad Wirth, the two important men that were both sons of important men they were friends. The two fathers had been friends, like that. And I gave them that, and they said, oh no, I don't think it could be. I think that Conrad Wirth was building all those roads, and he was building all those like our community centers, but in the national parks. He was putting in buildings where you could buy souvenirs and people could buy camping materials. And I said, don't you see what he was doing? It's the same thing his father did here. And they said, oh yeah, you're right. And so they did a study at the National Park Service based on the information I left them. And about maybe 4 weeks later, they got back to me and they said, you should apply for this. You should apply for this. We think it will happen, like that. And so I asked the National Park Service to send someone out and talk to our park board, explain to them why this is so important at a national level. And they did. And that is all available in park board meetings are recorded.
Yeah.
And at that moment, they also hired the superintendent, told her that she should live here, which made it impossible for me to stay here and do this for people. And so I felt that to keep everything safe, not from her, but just safe. I had reasons of being concerned about other people coming and going, other events happening here.
Yeah.
So I just removed everything from the house and put it in storage. It was in storage from 2010 until June of this year. I do believe we could get the support of the community. People love this, but they have to be able to come and see it to understand what it is we're doing. And I know that for a little while, the park board had up a lot of general history about the whole park system and different people. I think it's not as easy to understand. Well, it isn't the history that it's on the National Register for. We do talk about being the #1 park system in America, and that everybody along the way contributed. But we had to have something to contribute to, you know. And our early business leaders were quite visionary people. Charles Loring, in particular, hired HWS Cleveland, who created the first master plan, which when that was put on paper, people started to understand the idea could happen. Charles Loring, by the way, claimed in writing to the Olmsted firm that that was his plan. He created the plan. So I don't know. I don't know. But anyway, but Loring was a visionary, a businessman, and a great visionary who was a park commissioner, was the first park board president. And he hired HWS Cleveland. He also hired Theodore Wirth. And when he hired Wirth, he made him the superintendent. Cleveland was not the superintendent. He was an independent contractor. But he made Wirth, and he invested in Wirth so deeply by building him this house. And Wirth invested back by giving, and he didn't work for anybody else anymore. He didn't design private estates for people. He didn't, in his spare time, do any of that. He designed this park system. My children grew up in Minneapolis, benefited tremendously from the park system. My children never were taught any Minneapolis history in school. We are an amazing city, as maybe all cities are, but we have this park system, and they didn't know any history about it. So first of all, I want to see the children, elementary students especially, approximately 5th or 6th graders, I think is about the right age for those children, to be brought here so that they all the way through Minneapolis, since Minneapolis is specifically what we're speaking to in this house, to be brought through the house for tours. I have some pictures that I've taken even in these few weeks that I've been back here in the house of kids and how excited they get. They get literally excited. I never knew that. Oh, I love that. Look at that. Look at that. Here is a drawing of my park, and they get so excited. So first of all, I want them to take pride of ownership of their parks. I understand that some of our schools are far away, but I've been told, and I hope that this is correct, that our city bus company will transport children to parks for free. So if we have a typical field trip, then we should be able to have, one parent or teacher for every 5 children. Think of them riding a bus to a park and taking ownership of their citizenship. Think of that, and then coming here and learning how people lived when this idea was in its infancy, the idea of parks, how these children lived, and then see the offices where the parks were created for them. They get very excited, and I haven't had so many opportunities until just recently. But while I've been setting up the house here for 2 months, almost, actually more, I guess, when I think about it, I have people knock on the door and they say, is this a place that I can come? I have never turned anyone away. I may be, whatever I'm setting up, there may be boxes, there were boxes all over, and I take them through because this may be their only opportunity because they happen to be here that day. Yeah. The house, when I say this around groups of adults, they say, hey, don't give it all to the children. We want to learn about this too. When Mr. Wirth was living, the grandson, I saw him, he wasn't walking around so much at the end of his life because he had arthritis, Anyway, he'd be sitting in a chair and people would get done with the tour and they would literally drop to their knees. Say, Mr. Wirth, I am so grateful you came back to Minneapolis to tell us about this because I never knew this. I've lived here all my life and I never knew this.
Right.
So they like it too. So what do you think happens when they go to vote? They might think, I should know who my park commissioners are. And, we hope that that will be true. Although we're not here for political reasons, and I see us here strictly for education. Like the water to a fish, maybe the fish will understand it's water,